It's been 2 years since I married my husband, Thomas. While I've never been particularly remarkable in many ways, I was good at cooking. Your cooking, Sharon, it's comforting. He praised the lunch I made for our first date. That was what made me fall in love with him. After dating for 6 months, we got married. After leaving my job to become a full-time housewife, we started living with my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away about a year prior, so it was the three of us. While we were newlyweds, and I would have liked to live alone with Thomas for a while, when he said, "Mom has been feeling vulnerable since Dad passed away," I couldn't say no to moving in with her. Not long after we began our married life, I noticed my mother-in-law didn't seem to like me. I had dealt with people at work who nitpicked and bullied others, but she was far worse. It wasn't just pointing out when I'd missed a spot during cleaning. She'd say things like, "What's this brown spot here? What kind of eyes do you have?" Then she'd make me clean a stain on the floor that was already there, wouldn't come out, and was only released when Thomas came home from work. There were times she'd knock on my bedroom door in the middle of the night and say, "I'm about to run out of plastic wrap, so please buy it." Now. I couldn't sleep knowing we were running low. Of course, the supermarket was closed at that time, so I had to run to a convenience store. Whenever I tried to wake Thomas, she'd get furious and scold me, saying things like, "How can you wake your tired husband? House chores are a wife's job. It's pitiful if you have to rely on your husband." So I just complied. Being called in the middle of the night was physically draining, but having things hidden or thrown away was mentally exhausting. "I don't know. Did you forget where you put it?" She'd always reply when I couldn't find my belongings. It's unpleasant for someone to blame others for their own mistakes. I'll never forget the shock when, days later, I found my favorite cardigan in the non-burnable trash bag. When I told Thomas about this, he just sighed heavily. "Well, you can just buy a new one," he suggested, brushing off my request to intervene. Out of necessity, I used the money I had saved before getting married to buy a safe. I avoided leaving my belongings where my mill could see them, and kept particularly important items in the safe. It's disturbing to distrust your family. I'd love to see the faces of the parents who raised you. She'd add with increasing bitterness, always criticizing whenever she opened her mouth. She would find faults in my cooking, too. Either it was too bland, or it had no taste. If I tried to make it stronger, then it was too spicy. I got worried and I couldn't help but ask Thomas for his opinion on the taste. Mom's taste is extreme. I think it's delicious. Cooking, which used to bring me so much joy, had become hassle. This kind of life continued for about a year, when I had an epiphany. I shouldn't be stuck at home all the time. Realizing this, I decided to start working part-time. I quit my job because I was told that after getting married, I should focus on home life. But if being at home was this painful, I wouldn't have quit so easily. Despite having a bit of a career gap, I was appreciated for my quick learning at the part-time job. Being praised again made me simply happy. However, as I spent less time at home, my MIL's harassment became concentrated during breakfast and dinner. Previously, she would complain but eat, but then she started leaving a lot behind, just picking at her food and leaving the table. She dropped her soup bowl countless times, claiming it slipped. Biting back my frustration, when I asked her what was wrong, she'd just say, "You think you can get everything asking questions. You need to think for yourself." So, my days were spent cleaning up the leftover food at the dinner table alone. But then, my mill crossed the final line. One evening during dinner, she got up with her plate and headed towards the kitchen. Seeing her act so strangely, I looked up just in time to catch her grinning at me. Before I knew it, the meal I had prepared was being thrown into the trash right in front of me. Such a disgusting food. Even dog food would be better. I instinctively looked at my husband, but he pretended not to see and continued eating his own meal. I ran to the trash can, disbelieving. I opened the lid and looked down on the messed up food. "This is terrible." I looked back at my husband, but he didn't even glance my way. She wasn't feeling well. He casually excused his mother's behavior. Just because of that doesn't mean you can throw away food in front of the person who made it. My husband scratched his head as if it was troublesome for me to argue. "Hey, I have work tomorrow. You're a part-timer, so that's fine, but I'm a full-time employee, working from morning till night. What's wrong with working part-time? I work, cook meals at home, and then they get thrown away." As my voice broke into tears, my husband sighed deeply. Sharon, you've really become such a nag. That's probably what annoys my mom too. If it bothers you that much, you don't have to cook anymore. After saying that, my husband stormed off to his bedroom. I was left staring at his back in shock. I see this person doesn't care about me. Something inside me snapped. The next morning, I prepared breakfast as usual and called my husband and mother-in-law. My husband took a seat, and my mother-in-law picked up her plate on the table and said, "Even a dog wouldn't eat something like this in the morning." Then, she tossed the food into the trash. Silently, I stood up, took away the breakfast I had placed in front of my husband. I'm going to eat it. I put my hands together and started eating the breakfast I had prepared for my husband, ignoring both my mother-in-law's actions and my husband's confusion. "Wait, why are you eating my breakfast? What are you doing?" Feigning confusion, I replied, "Well, since Mill said it looked disgusting, I'll take responsibility for the dog food and dispose of it myself." "No, I didn't say anything like that." "But you didn't deny what Mill said." My husband opened his mouth, but he didn't seem to be able to say anything. "Sharon, stop joking around and give Thomas his breakfast." I look straight at my Mill and smile. "I apologize for serving you dishes that were like dog food until now. From now on, I won't cook, so please rest assured." I picked up my chopsticks again, finished eating, and stood up. "Hey, Sharon, what about my breakfast?" My husband said. "Do as you please," I replied, and hurriedly left the house. Usually, I get home around 5 o'clock, but because I had taken care of various tasks, before I knew it, it was past 8 o'clock. "Joe, you're late. We've been waiting. Where have you been wandering around?" My husband and mother-in-law said in unison, their stomachs rumbling with hunger. "Oh, haven't the two of you eaten yet? I've already had something." Seeing my utterly surprised expression, my mother-in-law's face turned red. "How dare you eat on your own as a wife?" I think I mentioned I wasn't going to cook anymore. Or were you perhaps eagerly anticipating my terrible cooking? How dare you have the audacity to say that?" In a burst of frustration, she slammed the dining table. Then, as if a light bulb went off in her head, she regained her composure. "If you're not going to cook, then you should give back the grocery money. Considering that it's Thomas's salary, it's only right that you should pay everything back in full." At her overconfident tone, I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. What's so funny? I've been the one paying not just for groceries, but for all living expenses ever since I started working part-time. And that was Thomas's suggestion. Mill wasn't happy about me working part-time, but Thomas told me that it would lessen the burden if I paid for the living expenses. I've been working part-time for a little over a year. For more than half of our married life, I've been the one covering our living expenses. My mother-in-law seemed unaware of this and looked at Thomas in shock. "Is this true, Thomas?" "Well, you kept asking me to increase your allowance." Thomas weakly muttered his excuse. It seemed he made me pay for the expenses and used the extra money to increase his mother's allowance. "Mother-in-law, it seems like you've been enjoying eating out for lunch quite a lot." I found a flyer for regular customers in the mailbox. I'd assumed she was cooking her own lunch, but when I saw the flyer, I had a suspicion. I checked the trash on trash day and easily found a receipt showing a lavish meal. Isn't it only fair to pay back all the living expenses so far, right? After all, it was my hard-earned money. "I'll be sure to send you an invoice, so please rest assured," I said, grinning broadly at my trembling mother-in-law. "Hey, what do you mean by an invoice?" Thomas, who seemed to have sensed something, changed color and stood up. "I'm getting a divorce, but only after I get a proper alimony." "Divorce," Thomas muttered in a daze, but then seemed to brighten up. "Do you really think you can leave the house with just a part-time job?" He must have thought that I couldn't stand on my own yet. "Well, about that part-time job, I've been offered a full-time position." "What?" "I found a place to live today." I'd actually planned to commute from my parents' house for a while, but it seems to have been a real blow to Thomas. "I'll let a lawyer handle the future procedures." Saying that, I returned to my room, grabbed my bags that I had prepared the night before, and left. Thomas was kneeling beside the dining table, but I ignored him and walked past. "Sharon, I'm sorry." I stopped and turned around. "What is the apology for?" "For what?" Well, it's about me being caught in the middle between you and Mom. I couldn't choose sides. It was hard for me too. But I never complained about the food being bad, did I? This man really doesn't understand anything. In the end, I was deeply regretful for not seeing him for who he truly was. It's not about picking sides. It's about how you watched as food was thrown away, as I was tormented, and you did nothing. No matter how much I cried for help, you wouldn't help. Even if you play the victim, it doesn't change the fact that you hurt me. When I told him this, my husband broke down and started crying. I glanced at the pathetic man curled up on the floor, then headed for the front door. As I reached for the door handle, my mother-in-law called out to stop me. I didn't intend for this to happen. I just wanted to give a little guidance. I admit I may have gone too far sometimes. It was impressive how the perpetrator didn't truly understand how vile her actions were. I've been taking care of you for so long, and to hear such an excuse at the end is disappointing. From now on, you can enjoy your meals without me. My mother-in-law was shocked. She stood there wide-eyed and completely still, as if she had forgotten to breathe. When I left the house and returned to my parents' house, I was warmly welcomed by my parents who had been listening to my story. From what my lawyer told me, my mother-in-law was famous in the neighborhood for her inability to do housework. Perhaps because my father-in-law was in charge of housework. After his death, my ex-husband and Mill lived only a convenience store food and eating out. Rumors soon spread Thai had left. The neighborhood network is something to fear, and even my ex-husband's company found out, causing him much embarrassment. He had not been saving money, and both he and his mother had been squandering what they had. I heard they were panicking about the alimony they owed me. Now that the rumor of the mother-in-law's bullying had spread, there were no takers for a new housekeeper, and they had no money to maintain their lavish meals. My ex-husband, desperate to get back the golden goose and housekeeper, kept sending me emails begging for reconciliation. I also received apology emails from my mother-in-law that sounded more like excuses. They were repetitive and uninteresting, so I stopped reading them. Cooking for my family and making snacks on holidays to share with my colleagues. Each time they complimented my cooking, my confidence in my cooking skills grew a little. With this hope, my heart swelled.